Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I wanted to try to answer the question for you guys when people stop and ask, who is stronger? Because this gets really confusing for a lot of people because they start throwing out weight class, they throw out body weight multipliers and all of that. And I want to address how this is looked at in actual strength sports so that people understand how absolute strength versus relative strength works. Example I gave on my Facebook the other day, and it clarified this for a lot of people, was I broke down, I'm like, who is stronger? If you have a really fat guy who's 650 pounds, and he has a squat, bench, and deadlift, that would all be meet legal, of 501 pounds. If we're just going to use powerlifting as the example, because there are other lifts. We have 6 lifts where we have strength standards for, and we have strength sports with other lifts. But these can be used as a proxy because most people agree at the very least that the squat and deadlift are good judges of overall strength. They're not everything, they're not the be-all end-all, but most strength and conditioning coaches think they're a pretty good proxy for at least lower body and back strength in an athlete. We can argue about pressing strength and other stuff at a different point. But this gives us an idea. This guy lifts 501 pounds in all these lifts. Then you have a skinny crackhead who weighs 99 pounds who can squat, bench, and deadlift 500. So 1 pound less on all of his lifts. Which guy is stronger? The guy who lifts 501. The guy who lifts 501. He is a pound stronger on all these lifts. In other words, he's capable of generating more force than the smaller guy. Not only that, not only is he lifting more weight, he's probably lifting it through a longer range of motion. Other than the bench press, obviously the really fat guy's going to have a much shorter range of motion on the bench press, and the 99-pound guy is probably pretty short. But all other things being equal, the guy who weighs 6.5 times the body weight of the other guy is slightly stronger. He outlifts him by 1 pound on all these lifts. There is no debate as to which one is stronger. Now, the question we get into, who's the better power lifter? Who's more impressive? Obviously the guy who weighs 99 pounds, because in fact that guy would be a world record holder all the way across the board. Now, if the smaller guy were to jump up to the other guy's weight class and try to beat him in his weight class, he would still lose. He would still lose against that guy, because he lifted less weight. The only time body weight comes into play in a given weight class is when people tie. In other words, if they both hit a 1500 total, the guy who weighed in the lightest gets the placing, he gets the win, right? And he also has a slightly better Wilks score. But you can always compete in any strength sport, you can always go up a weight class even though you weighed under. You can do that, that's allowed. But you'll lose if the other person outlifts you by a single pound. Only in the event of a tie does their body weight come into play. Now, if we were to do cross class, you go to any powerlifting meet, they do cross class and they do Wilks, in which case the smaller guy would probably win the overall for the raw. He would place first when we look at cross class. So as a power lifter, he would be better. He would be considered a better strength athlete, and for obvious reasons. His strength to weight ratio is enormously, mind-bogglingly better. But he is weaker. He's a whole pound weaker on all those lifts. He is not as strong as the other guy. Now, what we also need to factor in is that a lot of people try to bring up things like body weight multipliers. And you need to remember, again, body weight multipliers are not used in any strength sport. They have an algorithm they use to compare weight classes that puts a de-emphasis on your body weight. And the reason for that should be obvious. Who has better absolute strength, an ant or an elephant? The ant does. The ant is thousands of times stronger than an elephant pound for pound. Thousands of times stronger. What people need to understand is that when we've looked at humans, we found the exact same thing to be true. Pound for pound, the smaller and shorter a human is, the more they lift on their strength ratios. So in other words, if you're 5 foot tall and a male, as long as you don't have some structural defect that would prevent you from lifting heavy, odds are if you just trained really hard, you're going to have a better deadlift, squat, bench press, overhead press ratio than a guy who's 6'5", right? Even if he goes to the world level and you don't, your ratios are probably going to be better. It's going to be much easier for you to deadlift 4 times your body weight, or even 3.5 times your body weight. If you're 5 foot tall and you end up only weighing 125 pounds, getting to a 500-pound deadlift isn't unheard of. It's difficult. It will probably take many, many years of hard training because of that person's overall body weight, but it can be achieved, and it's not unreasonable. How many 6'5" guys have ever deadlifted 4 times their body weight? I don't think there's ever been a single one ever in the history of strength sports. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's ever been done. You guys see the problem now with the body weight ratios? The size of your frame impacts it. Guys in lighter weight classes, when you go to any strength sport, I don't care whether it's Olympic lifting, powerlifting, strength lifting, the people in the smaller weight classes have better strength to weight ratios, always, because it's easier for them to move a given amount of weight. There's a shorter distance involved, there's different leverages involved. Percentages or multipliers of their body weight are easier. The best way to get a high body weight multiplier on your lifts is to never gain weight and to actually spend most of your life in a caloric deficit. Stay as small as you possibly can. You'll gain a lot less strength, you'll be weaker, you'll have less muscle, you'll have less overall strength, but your ratios will be better. That's why these things aren't used. And they penalize people who have a bigger frame. Shorter person can have more muscle on them at a given body weight, therefore more strength pound per pound. And if they have a shorter frame, because they're shorter, they move the weight a shorter distance and they have less bone weight. So they end up with better ratios, but they lift a lot less. So when you look at this in context, this is how we determine who's strongest. You want to know who's strongest on the overhead press? Who lifts the most weight? A 206-pound strict overhead press is stronger than a 205-pound overhead press. This is pretty straightforward. Strength is how much force you can produce against an external object. It has no bearing on your body weight. This only matters when we are comparing people in a competitive environment who are usually lifting the same weight. Right? We have them in the same weight class. The person who's a few pounds lighter, if they match your weights, they'll beat you under the rules of most sport because they've proven that they've done so slightly more efficiently. But they have to tie you for that to count. And I would suggest to people who want to say, well, this person or that person is stronger. Well, no, not necessarily, because if we use that sort of logic, we would look at some really massive guy like the Hulk that C.T. Fletcher had on there and say, yeah, but he may have a really strong bench, he may have a strong deadlift, but what's his ratio? And if it's not very good, do we then say that guy is weaker? Of course we don't. Do we look at the world's strongest men and see that a lot of them have deadlifts that are less than 3 times their body weight? If that's actually the norm, do we then say that they're weaker when the guy deadlifts 900 pounds? Do we really say that he's weaker than a person who deadlifts only 500 pounds, but it's a better multiplier? Of course we don't. We know he's stronger. We know he's stronger. But that's why we have weight classes in sports, and that's why we have calculations like Wilks score and Grossbrenner to give us a better comparison of that person's strength potential relative to their body weight, and that's called relative strength. But relative strength is relative. It's not absolute. At the end of the day, 900 pounds is more than 800 pounds. And it takes more force to lift 900 pounds, barring a leverage advantage. But even then, leverage still allows for more force. But barring different advantages, it is what it is, guys. Moving more weight is moving more weight. And again, the only time this starts to really become more subjective is when techniques and things are used that cut the hard parts out of an exercise, such as a really short person, can deadlift a hell of a lot more with standardized plates because the weight moves a shorter distance and they're taking out the hardest part of the exercise. Someone who arches enormously on a bench press cuts out the hardest part of the exercise. So yeah, in these cases, their force generation is different. But when people are using similar techniques, similar forms, and roughly similar ranges of motion, how much weight you move is a good proxy for your strength, and more weight is more strength. Again, in most strength sports, body weight really only becomes a real factor, determining factor when we're dealing with different weight classes. But more importantly, that doesn't ever take someone's gold medal away in a sport. The only time you actually take someone's placing is when you're in their weight class and you tie them at a lighter body weight. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.